Today we're going to make what I call kind of a gift wrap collection. And essentially you're going to use 2 sheets of the identical design 12 by 12 designer series paper. And from that, you're going to get a gift bag, which is pretty big. It is 8 inches tall, 2 inches deep, and 3 3/4 inches wide. So it's actually a pretty good size. And it's, I think, kind of cute. We're going to make an envelope out of part of a sheet of designer series paper. This is an A2 size envelope. And then we're going to use a 1/4 sheet of cardstock in a color that is coordinating with whatever designer series paper you have. And you're going to have enough designer series paper left to make a card. Now, I will also send you instructions on how to make an envelope for a note card and a 3x3 card. So there are 3 different ways you can do this. And you're going to have an infinite range of possibilities for your card. And I've done 2 sets. Obviously, you can see this one is a little bit playful. It's the designer series paper that was part of the celebration recently. And then this cute little sentiment, be cool, be chill, be merry, just makes me smile, is part of the Penguin Place stamp set. So I did use that on this example. And then I used a little bit of the designer series paper that was left over from one of my sheets when I made this kind of card. And the season's greetings is also from the Penguin Place stamp set. So this is one kind of little set, and it's definitely playful. It has a lot going on with the, the penguin theme. So I thought that one was very fun. And then I wanted to do a different kind of set, which is, I guess, a little bit more traditional in terms of what it looks like for Christmas. This paper is old, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, I don't remember the name of the designer series paper, but I love it. And it is just, I'm trying to get the light on here a little bit better. That might be good. It's the exact same process to make the bag. It is the exact same process to make the envelope. This is, again, an A2 sized envelope. And I just changed up a couple of things when you look at these 3 pieces versus the other 3. One is the card. And this is a card style that should be familiar to you guys. It's one that we made probably 2 or 3 months ago. It's one of our mystery stampings. It was actually back in July. And you'll have enough designer series paper left over if you want to do one like this. And I'm going to show you this one. I just think this one's really fun. And the sentiments that I used on this card come from the Sparkle of the Season stamp set. So I used the Merry Christmas on the inside and May the Sparkle of the Season warm your heart and home on the outside. And I put a lot of bling. So the 2 things that are different when you look side by side, one is the way that I actually put the top of the bag together. And I'll talk through the differences. These are not the only options you have. There are many other ways to make the bag, especially at the top. And then the other big difference was the way that I chose to make the card. And again, they're just 2 different styles. They're both A2 size when they're done, and they both fit into the corresponding envelopes that are made with the designer series paper. So in my mind, this is a really nice way to use up that stash of designer series paper that you have. Don't be afraid to admit it, because we all have it. And it just makes a really nice little set that you can use to give a gift, maybe some cookies, something that you'll be proud to actually give to somebody. I am going to walk through how to do this, and then I will send the instructions And when I post this on YouTube, I will also add the dimensions in the description so people will be able to see it as we go along. I've chosen 2 pieces of 12 by 12 designer series paper. Again, these are old in terms of the patterns, and I wanted to do that purposely because I want to use up some of the paper that I have. So you will see that these are identical. I did that on purpose. I want to make sure that when I put these pieces together, that I have the same piece on all 3 so that they're going to match. So before I start with the scoring, which is what we're going to do to make the bag, I want to decide how I want my paper to show on the bag. So for example, I have an option of having the red at the top, which will be corresponding to the pattern over here, and then the design with the green at the bottom. Or obviously, I could switch it around. And this is where you can just decide what you want to do and how you want your bag to look. It's my personal preference. You may or may not agree, but what I want to do is I want to have the red as the top part that will fold down. And I want the green to be the dominant design that will be on the bag itself.
Michael.
So it's going to be like this. So the part that has the greenery is going to be the part on the bottom. So go ahead and figure out which design you want as your predominant one on your bag and put that into your scoring board. If you don't have a scoring board, not a big deal. You can put this paper into a paper trimmer and you can also make the score lines. So either way, you're going to end up with the same thing. And I'm just going to get my tools out of the scoring board here. My scoring, this is kind of like a bone folder, does the scoring, and then I have my bone folder over here. We are going to start by making 4 score lines on the top of the design. So put your design in so that you would be looking at it. If I had this piece of paper in and I was scoring, I would be looking at the penguin in this orientation. So if you have a design that is vertical, you want to lay it down so you can see that design vertically. Okay, the first score line that we're going to do is at 3 3/4. And just pause for 2 seconds before you do your score. Triple check that you're at 3 3/4. And then one other thing is sometimes on designer series paper, to get that score line, you don't really need to push super hard. The designer series paper typically is less thick than your cardstock. So be gentle. You don't want to put a hole in your paper, and you just want to go over that just once or twice. So the first one is at 3 3/4. The next one is going to be at 5 3/4. So again, pause before you start. So 5 3/4, and I'm just going to go all the way down. And I know the camera isn't getting the complete picture here, but trust me, I'm going all the way down to the edge of my paper. So I've done 3 3/4, 5 3/4. The next one is at 9 1/2. And I'm doing exactly what I've done the first 2 times. I'm literally pausing. I just want to make sure I've got it at 9 1/2. And I'm going to go all the way down. And I'm going to come back and I'm just going to give that a little bit of an extra score. The last one that we're going to do is at 11 1/2. So halfway from the edge. So 11 1/2. And we're just going to score that down. All right, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do that one more time. So again, the 4 score lines, 3 3/4, 5 3/4, 9 1/2, and 11 1/2. All right, we need to do 2 more score lines, but before we do that, all you're going to do is you're going to rotate your paper 90 degrees, and you're going to put it back into your scoring board or your paper trimmer, whichever you have. And we're going to do 2 score lines on this side, and that's all the scoring that we're going to do. The first one is at 2 inches. So I'm just going to, again, on the absolute inch number, you don't really have to pause that long because it's pretty obvious where you're going to be scoring. So at 2 inches, and then we're going to come in 2 inches from the right. So if we end at 12, we're going to come to 10. So our next score is going to be at 10 inches. And we're just going to score that all the way down. So again, on this side, you're going to score at 2, and you're going to score at 10. And then your scoring is done. You can go ahead and take your scoring board out. We're not going to need that again until we do the envelope. All right. Sometimes the score lines are a little tricky to see depending upon what the pattern is. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to burnish all your score lines. So I'm just starting where I can see one of those lines. I'm starting at the 2 inch, and I'm just going to fold it up, and I'm going to score it. And one thing, as you're going through this, do your best when you are making the burnish on your score lines. Just try to make sure that the edges are aligned. So try to get them as straight as you can. It will help when you finally put your bag, together. And if it's not perfectly aligned, that's okay. It will just work a little bit better if they're pretty aligned. All right, now I've done those 2 inch ones. Those were the last 2 score lines that we did. I brought those in. Now we've got 4 score lines on the other direction. So I'm just going to find one of those. And sometimes you may need to sort of start a score line, and you can feel where that is. Line up your edge, and I'm just going to press that down. So that was one of the score lines that I made. And if you want to give that a good burnish, burnishing these as you go is a good idea. Now I'm going to find another of my score lines, which is right here, because I can feel that. Just going to put my paper right by the edge. Get it as straight as I can. And just fold that down. Yeah, I got that one a little bit too far, so let me try it over here. Sometimes you just need to get one of those folds going, and then you can kind of see what you're doing. All right, so there I've got my fold going. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to line that paper up, and I'm going to make sure that I can fold on that score line. And again, sometimes the paper pattern is going to hide that score just a tad. And I've got 2 more that I need to do. So I'm lining up my edge. I'm going to fold my paper, running down the score line that I made, burnish that. And then the last one that I have is that 1/2 inch. And this one, again, I'm just going to try and get it as close to the edge as I can, lined up, and bring that right down and try and line it up. And then I'm going to burnish that one as well. Okay. So if we look at this, we started with 4 score lines in one direction, and I have burnished those 4. Then we had 2 score lines in the other direction, and I have burnished those. So what we need to do is we need to actually do a little bit of cutting. And to do that, I am going to grab a pair of scissors that I like to use when I'm doing snipping of paper. And I'm going to orient mine so that when I'm looking at it, on my right is the 1/2 inch score line. And if I do that, it's just going to help me to show you what we're going to be cutting. And we're going to start down on the bottom left or bottom right. So this is where that 1/2 inch score line is. And I want to cut out this little rectangle. So I'm going to cut, literally just cut it out. I'm at that 1/2 inch score line, and I'm going to cut up to the first score line that, the way I'm looking at this, is horizontal. So this would be 2 inches in. I'm going to cut that, and then I'm going to cut this little piece off as well. And this is just the 1/2 inch. So if I take that little piece away, and this is pretty much the only scrap that you're going to have making this bag when you cut that out. So you're going to take that little rectangle, and that's going to go away. This is going to be the bottom of our box, which is why, or bag, which is why we're cutting it. The next line, that next score line, which is on the right, you're just going to cut straight up, and you're going to cut it to the same height as you did on this flap. This is going to give us a flap that we're going to use to do part of the bottom of the bag. Move over to your left, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to cut up to the same score line. So you've got one small flap, you've got a larger flap, and you can guess we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to cut this, and we're going to go right up to that same score line. So we're going to end up on the bottom, we're going to have 4 independent flaps. Before we put the box together, there's one more thing we need to do, and that is going to be on the smaller flaps. So these 2, we're going to do a little bit more trimming. The bigger ones, leave them alone. And what we're going to do is we're going to miter the corners on these 2. Let me show you. If you've mitered before, you know what I'm talking about. What this will do is it will allow us to put the bottom of the bag together so that the tabs fit together more easily. And all I did was I took a little sliver out, and the sliver looks like kind of a long rectangle or long triangle. So it's a little bit wider at the bottom, and it's going to go right into the corner where I cut it out. You don't have to get this perfect. It really doesn't matter if you just get a little bit off the side. And it's also easier to cut these little miters if you pull the tab next to the tab that you're cutting, pull that away, and that way you can get up into the corner. I want to do the exact same thing on this tab. So I've pulled the longer pieces up so they're out of my way, and I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to take a little slice out of that. It doesn't matter if the sizes of these slices are the same or different. All that matters is I'm taking a little bit of that paper off so that when I put the bottom of the bag together, it will fit together a little bit better. I just want to show you something. To make this bag, this is the only waste that we're going to have on the 12 by 12. You can check this. We're not going to use it. And you are now ready to put your bag together. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are actually going to flip this over. And this is going to be the side that I'm going to look at. So again, to be completely repetitive, this pattern is the analogous to the penguins. This is going to be the major pattern that I'm going to look at. I want to create the top band for this bag. Well, let's look at how I've oriented my paper. Since I turned it over, I now have that little slice on the bottom left. If I go to one of the scores and burnishes, this is the one that we did that was 2 inches from the side. This is going to create the top of my bag. So fold that over and you'll have the major pattern on your left. You'll have the fold pattern on your right. Give this a good burnish. You really want to try and get this to lay pretty flat. And if you can, kind of triple check that it's aligned on each side so that it's nice and straight-ish, that will be great. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab some glue. I'm using Tombow, and we're going to glue this flap onto the top of what will become the bag. Now, whenever you're gluing something that goes onto a piece, glue what you are folding over, meaning put the glue here, don't put the glue over here. If you put the glue over here, you may inadvertently put too much glue and then you're going to have a mess. If you put the glue on this piece, you're not going to go outside the lines. You're going to have, the size of what it is that you're gluing because it's right there. You don't need to put a lot of glue on this. In fact, I recommend that you don't put a heck of a lot of glue because this is going to not only go on top, it's also going to fold. It is going to be part of the bag that is going to fold into the shape of the bag. Give this a nice burnish, and especially on the edge, you really want to make sure that you've got a really good burnish there. All right, so we can see our bag is coming together. The next thing that we want to do is we want to form the bag. We actually want to make sure that we've got our rectangular shape. So in order to do that, what I recommend is that you go back to each of your scores and just give it a nice burnish. And what you're doing especially is burnishing the area that you just glued. That needs to sort of be refolded because you haven't burnished the paper when that top has been glued down. So just give each of the folds a nice burnish, which will mean that you're going to be doing 4. And make sure that you do the one that has the 1/2 inch fold as well. All right, so I've just got one more that I need to do. And then we're going to put the side of our bag together. All right, so in order to get this together, what we're going to want to do is this is going to be the piece that gets adhered to this side. So we want to put these two together. The way that we're going to do that is we are going to put our piece down so you can see this is the inside of the bag, and you're going to see that you have the 1/2 inch fold. We're going to put glue on the 1/2 inch fold. The way you can tell where you are is if you just unwind everything, you want that notch that you cut out on your bottom left, and you're going to have your fold right down at the bottom. Take a little bit of glue. You don't need an awful lot here. Make sure that you do get some toward the top and bottom. Don't go all the way to the top or the bottom because you might squirt glue in places you don't want. And then we are going to turn our piece like this, and you're going to go to your second score line. So you've got your 1/2 inch over here. You've got one score line, you've got the second score line. And if you lay this flat, those two pieces should meet. Now, if you use liquid glue, you have the opportunity to make sure that you've got those sides aligned against each other. This to me is a bonus because if you were to use tear and tape or double-sided tape, you don't have that opportunity. You stick the piece down and you're done. You don't have the opportunity to move things around. When you're happy with where things are, you may want to just take that bone folder like you just saw me do and just give it a little bit of a burnish just to make sure that it's attached. And there we have the beginning, almost the end of the bag. So the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to put the bottom together. What I like to do when I figure out how I'm going to attach the bottom and the order that I'm going to do it is I like to figure out where the back of the bag is. So if you look on the inside of your bag, on the back, you're going to see that you've got an overlay of where that 1/2 inch is that you just glued. And if you put that 1/2 inch toward the back, that's going to be the back of your bag. It just looks a little bit better in the back, which means that we want to, I'm looking at the front of the bag, we want to try and have the front of the bag go over last. That'll give us just a nice finish. So I know that this is the back. I'm going to flip it over. And now I'm going to work on putting the bottom together. All right. Draw down the large 2 pieces and then pull the little pieces in. Get your glue. And what we're going to do first is we're going to put a little bit of glue on each of the smaller tabs. Don't get crazy about the amount and don't get crazy about where you put it on the tabs. It really doesn't matter. Because I flip this over and I have the back toward me, I know that I want to put my back flap in first. So all I'm going to do is fold this over. Now again, because I'm using liquid adhesive, I have an opportunity to just square this off and make sure that it looks nice and perpendicular. Now I'm going to take the glue and I'm going to put a little bit more on this time. I don't want to get really, really close to the edge of any of the edges, and I'm going to put a little bit in the middle. And then I'm going to fold down that other side. And again, because I'm using liquid glue, I can move that around and get it aligned the way I want it to be. Then what I like to do is stand the bag up and just put my hand in and give those tabs a little bit of a press. That's going to make sure that everything down at the bottom of the bag is nice and straight. That is the basic bag. And let me bring back, I want to bring back the other 2 examples that I showed you, because you can see that they are all made the exact same way to start. But now you have options. You can finish your bag in various ways. One is, and this is one of many because you're going to come up with other ways. One is that you can tie a ribbon, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Another, you could put holes in the top part and you can put ribbon through to put handles on, and I'll show you that in just a minute. The one thing that both of these have in common is that there's a pinch on the side. So what you're going to notice is if I bring back the bag that I just made, this is, for all intent and purpose right now, more like a box without a top. It doesn't have a pleat on the sides. There are some punch boards that you can get that will make those pleats, but the easiest way to make the pleat is to hold your bag like this. So you've got your middle finger and your thumb on either side, and then take your pointer. And if you just pull those edges together and you squeeze it and you press it, and I like to press it to the top of what I folded down. That will give you a nice little crease. So it will start to behave a little bit more like a bag, you know, like a bag that we all know and like to have closed. You can continue to pinch that down further if you want, but you're going to get to a point down here where you can't pinch it because you're not going to be able to bring this together. It's just too sturdy. So let me talk to you about what I did. And again, you're going to come up with a bunch of different ideas of how you're going to close this off. But as an example, and you're going to wonder, what are you doing, you crazy woman? But when I did the bow, I used these 2 paper clips and I just held that top closed, and I got some ribbon and I tied the ribbon into a bow. I am not taking this off right now because it would take way too long to retie it. But theoretically, you should be able to squeeze this a little bit more closed, lift the bow off, and then if you want to put the bow back on, you can squeeze the bag closed and pull the bow over. That's theoretical. We're not going to try it because that bow looks pretty okay, I think, but that's an option. Another option that I've seen is to get a really pretty clip and put the clip on the top, and you can decorate the clip. That looks kind of cool. And the other option that I did, again, this is one of many, is I wanted to put some holes in the top and make a handle out of a piece of ribbon. Well, I decided to be a little bit persnickety on the way I did this. So I cut a jig. This is simply the width, which is 3 3/4. You remember the first score line we did was 3 3/4, and it's by 2 inches. The next score line we did was at 5 3/4, which is 2 inches further from 3 3/4. So that's how we get the size of this box, or bag, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. And I just built this because I figured if I'm going to make a lot of these, I may want to put the hole in the same place. And I just figured out where the hole would go. I got out my trusty old, and when I say old, I mean old hole punch. And I punched holes. Well, first I put this on, I put a little circle so I knew where I wanted to do my holes. Punched out the holes. I got some ribbon and I tied knots on the inside. And I'm not going to pretend that those knots are going to stay. So what I will end up doing is put probably some hot glue right underneath the tails of those ribbons and just stick them to the side of the bag. And then I put in a little bit of tissue paper. And this is funny, that tissue paper is from the latest paper pumpkin. So I have a dual purpose for that, which was kind of cool. So I know you're going to come up with many, many different ways of decorating the bags. All right, so we've done kind of part 1 of the project, and we've got 2 more parts. So the 2 more parts that we have include the envelope and a card. The piece that I especially want to show you is the envelope. And the card, you can do what you want with the card. Many, many, many possibilities. I will replicate how I did this one in the one that I'm going to show you. So let's talk about the envelope for a minute. And I should mention that the envelope design dimensions are ones that Sara Douglas, who is the CEO of Stampin Up, shared on a Facebook post that she did a little while ago. And I saw it, tried it, loved it, and thought I would share it with you. So I am going to get the second piece of designer series paper, and you will remember that this matches the one that I used to make the bag. So this is why for these 3 pieces, you need 2 of the same design on the 12 by 12 designer series paper. And the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to cut this in half. And it really doesn't matter all that much how you cut this, except if you care about how your card is going to look. So when I look at this paper, I want my card design to go this way. I want my card to have this kind of design on it. So I'm actually going to flip my paper this way, and I'm just going to cut this in half. So I'm cutting my 12 by 12 in half, right down the middle. I'm going to take one piece and put that to the side. And then I'm going to take the other piece, and we're going to make the A2 envelope out of this one. So you're going to need to grab your scoring board one more time. And for this, we're going to make 4 score lines. We're going to do 2 on one side. We're going to flip it, and we're going to do 2 on the other side. And we'll do a little bit of cutting, and then we're going to form our envelope. So I am putting this piece into my scoreboard where I have the 6-inch side at the top, and obviously the 12-inch side going vertically. And I want to score at 3/4 inch on this side. So I'm triple checking just like I did when I did the bag, and I'm going to do 3/4 inch all the way down. And I know how far and how much I should and should not push to score this, because it's obviously the same paper that I scored when I was doing the bag. Now you can do the other score line one of 2 ways. You can come in 3/4 inch, which would put you at, you're going from 6, so you're going to go down to 5 1/4. Or if you want, and this is what I tend to do, I'm just going to flip that all the way around, so 180 degrees. Here's the score line that I just did, which is now showing at 5 1/4, but I'm going to do it over here at 3/4. Don't ask me why I do this. I really don't know. I don't have a good reason. All right, so essentially we've scored 3/4 inch in on either side. Now we're going to flip this. On one end, we're going to score at 2 inches. So just right down 2 inches. And then, yep, I'm just going to flip this around. Again, don't ask me why. And this time I'm going to score at 4 1/4. So I'm just looking at this again, and I'm going to score that at 4 1/4. All right, so let me tell you again what these are. So on the short side, 3/4 inch on either side. And then when it's on the long side, 2 inches, 4 1/4. And I will make sure that all of these measurements are provided to everybody. Just like we did on the bag, make sure that you go through and just burnish your score lines. And this is where you You don't have to decide yet. I haven't really decided which side I want to be on the outside of my envelope. But I'm just going to go through and I'm going to score. So I've got 2 score lines going horizontally, and I have 2 score lines going vertically. And I am just going to make sure that they're nice and burnished. So I've done my 2 that are horizontal, and I'm going to do the other one. And let's make sure that I get a really nice crease on that. And then the same thing over here. And make sure I get a really nice crease on that. So let's look at this envelope that is done and kind of figure out where we're going. So if I orient you on the score lines, the top is the 2-inch, the bottom is the 4 1/4. So this is eventually kind of how it's going to work. Obviously, we need to cut a little bit. So very similarly to what we did before, we are going to be doing some cutting. And what we're going to do first is on each corner, you have a rectangle. This is the one that was the 2 inches in. This is the one that was the 4 1/4. These rectangles, there are 4 of them. They all need to come out. And I'm going to tackle the ones that take a little more time. They're not monumental at all. I'm starting on the side that had the 4 1/4 inch score line. And I'm just cutting up to that 4 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to cut off the 3/4 inch. So if you're looking at your piece, this is the 4 1/4 score, and I'm just cutting out that piece. I'm going to mimic the same thing on this side. So I'm just going to cut that right out. And there are a lot of boxes and 3D pieces that are on the internet that people have shared that do a lot of cutting that's similar to this. And you'll find that many of them do the mitering. And we're going to do a little bit of mitering on this one as well. So here's the 4 1/4. I've cut these 2 pieces out. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the same on these little parts. So this is the 2 inch. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut out that rectangle. I really like these little scissors. Stampin' Up snips, which are similar, are not in stock right now. They are very popular. And when they're back in, I'm going to get some because they are fabulous to do something like this. They've got a really nice point at the end of the blade, and you'll see that on these scissors as well. So they get right into where you want to go. And I'm just going to cut off that piece as well. All right. So here's where I am right now. I've cut off these 4 corners. Well, we've got these flaps, and these are the ones that are going to receive this bottom piece. But you may, if you even try this, you may see that if you fold it up right now, it's not working really, really well. Part of this paper is curling up. That's why we're going to miter them. So I won't turn it over. I've just reoriented. So here's my 2 inch, here's my 4 1/4. These 2 tabs, I'm going to miter. So all I'm going to do, just like I did on the bag, is I'm going to cut a little slice out. And again, don't get hung up. If the 4 slices that you cut aren't the same, it doesn't matter. All you're doing is giving that paper a little room to move the way you want. And I'm coming over to the other side, and I'm just going to cut that off. And I'm going to cut the other piece off. All right. So now if you fold those tabs in, you've got that little bit of room and the bottom is going to fold over much, much easier, and it's going to look much nicer. Okay, so let's talk about the last couple of steps in putting the envelope together. And before I glue it down, you're going to notice that I rounded the corners on the top of mine. That's optional. If you want to, great. If you don't want to, whatever you want to do is fine. The top is going to be the part that has the 2-inch score. And this is a really cool punch. It's a 3-way punch. So I'm just using it to do the corner round. Going right in and punching that out. And then I'm going to come to the other one. Punch that out as well. And you can see sometimes with thinner paper, that punch just doesn't love going into the corner. So I'm just going to trim that off a little bit with my scissors, and we're good to go. Okay, so now we're going to put that envelope together. And what we're going to do, let's think about this. It's the same thing that we did on the bag. This is the piece that is going to be adhered. And you've got extra up at the top. You don't want to get glue on here. So I'm going to put my glue on here, on the part that is going to get folded over. And I'm also going to make sure that I don't put glue right down at the bottom, because if I do, I may put glue on the inside of the envelope, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to go a little bit away from that bottom part, just to make sure that I don't glue the inside of the envelope together. And then I am literally going to fold this over, fold these pieces down, fold that over, and there's my envelope. So I've got an envelope for each of the patterns. And when you think about this, you know, there's no adhesive right now that would allow me to close this envelope. That's okay. I can tape it. I can put some more glue on it. There's also glue that you can get that purposely is used to dry, and then you can wet it and stick it down like you do a normal envelope. The other thing I want you to take notice of, and I'm sure you already have, is you can't really easily write on these necessarily. So you may want to think about, you know, how you would address these. These will go in the mail. You literally can send them in the mail. They will be perfectly fine, but they may need a label, or if you cut out a rectangle with a die, you could put that on, glue that on, and then write the address on. So there are different ways that you can actually put them together, but they will work absolutely as an envelope. So not a problem. Okay. So we've done 2 pieces using the new paper. We've made the bag. Don't have the top done yet. That's okay. We have some examples that we can use. We have the envelope. So the last thing that we need to think about is, what would we do for the card? What is our card going to look like? And there are infinite ways that you can do that. You can make it pretty simple, like the one that I did on the left, which goes with the first collection that I showed you, or you can make it a little bit more decorative, like the one that I showed over here on the right. I kind of like this one on the right, and I like the way that it folds. It's one of the folds that we did a couple of months ago. And the really cool thing is, with the paper that I've left over from the piece that I made the envelope, I have enough to make this card, no problem. So let's kind of refresh our brains on what we did to make that card. To make that card, you are going to need 1 piece, a 1/4 sheet of cardstock. And I've chosen a color that coordinates with the designer series paper that I have. And it actually coordinates with either side. Obviously, I kind of like that side a little bit better. And what I'm going to do now is cut the designer series paper into the size that I need to make this trifold. And then we're going to just refresh our brains on the score lines that we did for this. So we are going to cut this down just a little bit. So I'm going to grab my paper trimmer one more time. And I'm going to put this in. I need it to be 12 inches long, which it is, which is great. But I need to trim off just a little bit. And I need to trim it to 5 3/8. So I'm going to go over to my 5 3/8 line. And I'm going to trim that off. Now, save this piece. You may want to use it. You may not. I ended up using the scraps that I cut off to put this piece in, and also to do a little bit more that I have left over, because I'm going to do a little bit more on the bag. So if you have some scraps, don't chuck them until you figure out what you're going to do with them. The next thing I'm going to do, because again, I want to replicate that card, is I'm going to grab my scoreboard. I'm going to put it on the long end and just get that scrap out of the way. And then all we need to do for this type of card is we're going to make 3 score lines. One is at 1 inch. The second is at 4 inches. And this is only if you want to do this kind. And the other is at 8 inches. So 1, 4, and 8. And I'm going to take that piece out of my scoring board. And yet again, for this project, I'm going to give these a nice burnish. And this is where you can kind of decide which way you want the pattern to look. And you know what? That'll do it right. So I'm going to play here for a minute and see which way I want the pattern to go. So I'm just going to fold all of this, and I may need to do a little trimming because I can see that the edges are not lining up perfectly, but that's okay. There's always a way. Fold that back. And fold my piece over. And then what I will end up doing with this card is I'm going to do a little trimming. I'm not going to bore you guys to tears watching me trim paper, but the way that I would orient this is I would glue. Let me show you how I folded it. So this was our 1 inch, our 4 inch, and our 8 inch. And I would actually glue this piece so that it is on my card like this. So I've glued it down to the right, the bottom right. And then I'm going to put glue on here. I'll show you the finished one in a second. And that will end up sticking down. And then it will open like this. A really kind of cool trifold. And then you can finish your embellishments however you want. So let me bring the one that I did like that back in, and I will tell you what I did, and we will mimic what we just did. So this is where I scored at 8. This is where I scored at 4, and I've already folded over where I scored at 1, and I adhered that down. And then I just added some bling. I thought, if I'm going to say maybe the sparkle of the season, warm your heart, it better sparkle. So it sparkles, people. It sparkles. It sparkles here, 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 and here. and I may add more sparkle. But I thought that was a really nice way to just use up that last piece of the designer series paper and make a really pretty card that will end up being the last component of the 3 pieces that were put together for this particular collection. And the stars are really the bag. And again, you can do that bag however you would like. And the envelope is really nice as well. And you can choose whatever side you would like to use. So I'm just going to bring these back in one more time. The twine that I used here is the silver twine that comes from the Simply Elegant trim. And I just did a double bow and put that behind and then bump that up with dimensional. So it gives it a little bit of a pop. So that's one of the pieces. And then if you want to do a little bit more playful of a design and just have something that's kind of fun, you can obviously swap these 3 pieces out, do a little different on your card, do a little different on your bag. And this one might be for maybe for our granddaughter. She's a senior in high school and might like the penguins. So I really, really hope that you give this a try. And I think you will find that when you do this, that you are going to come up with a bunch of ideas that will allow you to decorate your bags however you want. You could put sentiments on these as well, and not just on the cards. And you can just do a lot of different things. I do need to give credit to the lady that I saw do the bag on YouTube. Her name is Heather Forgan, and she has a YouTube channel that's called Stamped with Nellie or Stamp with Nellie, and she just did an awesome job. And I will be modifying some of these bags to make them a little bit different in size, but they're going to be essentially the same design. So please share what you do, and I hope you enjoyed this.